Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar on migration policy in the lead up to the teach-in this year. I am excited for what we're about to talk about. I'm excited that we have Pedro de Velasco joining us from the Kino Border Initiative to go into detail about migration policy. And I think we can get started. Yeah, listo, Pedro.
Listo. Thank you very much, Jorge, and thank you to everybody that is here interested in learning more about migration policy. And of course, the idea behind this is that you're able to, feel better prepared when you do some good advocacy before congressional offices. So you already covered that part. So let's get started with our presentation on migration policy. So I'm going to share my screen. And so as Jorge was mentioning, I work with the Kino Border Initiative. We are a Catholic binational organization that works with migrants in the border of Nogales, Sonora, Nogales, Arizona. We provide humanitarian assistance, but we also provide holistic accompaniment, and we advocate for humane, just, and workable migration between Mexico and the United States. So we do advocacy in the US, but we also do advocacy on the Mexican side. And so today I'm gonna briefly talk about a few of the things that are happening not only at the border, but in our nation regarding migration. So let's talk about asylum. So according to international law and according to domestic law, the law in the United States, a person who's fleeing violence, persecution in their home country has the right to present before another country to request protection, to request assistance, to request asylum. That is what is asylum. This international protection of a person who's fleeing this violence, this persecution, and therefore can no longer stay safe in their home country. So how it should work is that if a person is fleeing this violence, this persecution in their home country and arrives to the border, then they request, to be admitted, to be allowed to enter the United States. And once already inside the United States, they could begin the asylum process. The other form of doing it is, a person crosses through a non-designated port of entry to a remote area. They make themselves apprehended by the border authorities, and they begin also the asylum process. So in those scenarios, as you're saying, they can be either released to a family, to a relative, to a sponsor, and they wait for the court decision. So to be admitted inside the United States doesn't immediately mean to be granted asylum, but it means that the person is already inside the United States, and inside the United States can begin the asylum process. The other form is when the person is detained and could be held in detention for the whole duration of the asylum process. And they are usually, when they are detained, when they are not admitted at the port of entry, they have to stay in detention, and they are trying to fight their deportation, their removal. So that's basically how it used to be. Like any person, if they are suffering violence in southern Mexico, in Central America, in whatever region of the world, and they are able to arrive to US soil, they should be not necessarily granted asylum, but given the chance to present their case, for their case to be heard. And then if they do meet the requirements, then they can qualify for asylum. So then, we have in 2018, so this is relatively new, before like less than 5 years ago, we didn't have any issue. This used to be the asylum process. But in 2018, there was this decision by the government say like, I'm going to put a cap, a limit of number a number of people that I will be processing each day, and the rest will need to wait in Mexico. So that was what everybody refers to as metering. So people were forced to wait for their turn on the Mexican side of the border for a chance to be admitted inside the United States and then begin the asylum process. But a lot of these people, they were fleeing violence and persecution in Mexico, and they were forced to wait in Mexico for an opportunity to access safety. And there was a lot of problems with these lists because they weren't handled by the U.S. government in some border ports of entry, some border cities. They were handled by nonprofit organizations. At other parts of the border, they were handled by municipal governments of Mexico. So yes, there was a lot of corruption, a lot of lack of transparency, and metering was over. Then the US government came out with this other idea that is remain in Mexico, the so-called MPP, the Migrant Protection Protocols. Basically what it means is that people from other countries than Mexico, they were forced to wait in Mexico for their hearing dates. So they waited on the Mexican side, and they were told when they needed to present. But there were a lot of violations documented, a lot of dangers, abuses, extortions, kidnappings, and different dangers that the migrants suffer while in Mexico. You have to keep in mind that a lot of the people that are running from violence, that are trying to seek asylum, they are Mexican themselves. And there's a presence of the organized crime across Mexico that makes it unsafe for migrants to be waiting at the border. And that was the situation. And you probably heard that Remain in Mexico was on and off between 2019, then 2020, then it came back on the 2021. Then it's now off again, but you still have some people that need to be disenrolled of the program, but there are no new migrants considered, new asylum seekers considered for MPP. And then you have Title 42. So what happened with Title 42? On March 20 of 2020, the authorities decided that they have found the perfect excuse to limit access to asylum, to limit the right to asylum. And they say basically we're shutting down the border because of COVID-19. So the excuse behind it is, we need to limit to reduce the transmission of COVID-19, and therefore we're not allowing any person fleeing violence and persecution to enter the United States, as if asylum seekers were, have a higher risk of transmitting COVID-19 versus a US citizen or a legal permanent resident. And the problem is that, and you may be aware of this, that all across the United States, the measures to mitigate COVID-19 have been eased, have been even some canceled. The mandate to wear a mask at a lot of places, they have been suspended, or the social distancing restrictions. Like, life is getting back to normal anywhere but the border, where we still have Title 42. So what's happening right now at the border? If a family approaches the port of entry before the officer of Customs and Border Protection and say, I'm fleeing violence and persecution, I fear for my life, for my safety and the safety of my children, please allow me to go inside the United States and begin the asylum process, they're told, no, there's no asylum because of Title 42. And that's the situation. And that's the situation has been going on for the last 2.5 years. As you can see, there's no access to asylum. And at the same time, Title 42, it doesn't only mean the denial at the port of entry. If out of desperation, families decided to try to cross through remote, dangerous areas, they are being immediately expelled under this same policy, Title 42. So, they should be able, because they are already inside the United States in US soil, they should be given an opportunity if they express fear of being returned to their home country. They should be given access to an interview to determine if this is a credible fear, if there are reasons to believe that they're in danger. There's also protection, specific protections for people who suffer torture in their home country. And right now, these are not being observed with the excuse of the pandemic. So this is the problem right now with Title 42. So, and this is, I already mentioned when it started, but this is something to consider very important. The CDC announced it on April 1st of this year that there was no longer a need to keep Title 42 in place, that it was no longer necessary. Not that it ever was, but they say that the numbers of cases of COVID make it possible for resuming processing asylum requests at the border. So they announced the intention to terminate Title 42 as of May 23 of this year. But 2 days after, attorney generals from the states of Arizona, Louisiana, Missouri, they filed a lawsuit against this order of termination. And then, 18 other states followed. And basically they were saying, all the arguments behind it had nothing to do with COVID-19, but more, this fear of invasion, of migrants coming to our country and, overcrowding the system and everything. And those were the arguments behind it. And of course, they presented before the district court in Louisiana, because they know that an appeal will go to the 5th Circuit, and it's usually more conservative in their resolutions. But yeah, just 3 days before the day that Title 42 was supposed to come to an end, this judge, Summer Hayes in Louisiana, he granted the preliminary injunction and therefore blocked the Biden administration from ending Title 42. So the decision to keep Title 42 in place, it's currently from the court, not specifically from, not from the Biden administration, although there have been legislative efforts at the Congress trying to keep Title 42 in place, make it, part of the law that Title 42 should remain, and specific ways to terminate it. There was this bipartisan bill by Langford and Sinema that have specific measures to keep Title 42 in place. And there's also been efforts by the Biden administration, even though they tried to terminate it. There's been efforts to extend Title 42 to other nationalities, and and trying to negotiate with Mexico the reception of these other nationalities, that they can also be expelled under Title 42. So that's basically the current situation. But what does it mean to the migrants that are experiencing? How are they impacted by Title 42? Well, 74% of the people that we serve at the Kino Border Initiative in Nogales, Sonora, they tell us that the reason that they are trying to get to the United States, is because they are fleeing violence, because they're fleeing this persecution. So it's not, that it's not a migration by choice. It's not that they want to, the American dream. They want to go to the United States in order to work, for economic opportunity. I mean, yes, to many of them, that is also important. But the reality is that these people were forced out of their hometowns, of their home countries, and they are arriving at the border with hopes, with dreams, seeking protection, seeking assistance. And it is until they arrive to Nogales that they're learning for the first time that there is no way through. And for most of them, there's no way back, because they were told, you either collaborate with the organized crime, you either pay us, you either have your son work for us, you either do this, or you get out of here. So they leave their hometowns and they arrive to the border hoping to request, hoping for a chance to be able to be admitted inside the United States and begin an asylum process. And they are telling us, I can't go back. They already burned down my home, or they already burned down the fields, that was my source of income. So I cannot go back, but I can also keep going. I'm stuck. And that's the reality. People are stuck in Nogales, Sonora. People are stuck in all the other border cities because Title 42 is making it virtually impossible for migrants to seek humanitarian protection. And so I want to share with you the testimony of Carlota. She's a migrant that used to be in Nogales. She was in Nogales for several months, waiting for an opportunity to request an exception to be exempted from Title 42 and therefore begin the asylum process inside the United States. So she waited for months and months, but she didn't wait just with her arms crossed and waiting for something to change, but she actually took the opportunity and organized herself along with other migrants to march to request the right to asylum and also to request the rights in Nogales, because migrants that are wearing in border cities, they also face discrimination. They also face barriers to access security, medical assistance, education for their children, housing, job, etc. So all of these problems are a consequence of this lack of access to asylum, but also like this forced destination at border towns. So let me share Carlota's testimony with you.
Mi nombre es Carlota. Nosotros decidimos con mi concuña solicitar el asilo por la situación que estamos viviendo en la sierra del estado de Guerrero. Hace 2 años empezaron familias a pelear ya fuerte. Primero era a orillas, ya después era al centro del lugar. Aún habiendo militares, aún habiendo gobierno, como nosotros le llamamos allá, no respetaban. El gobierno igual, después de que se terminaban siempre las balaceras, entonces ellos salían. Fue muy triste, o sigue siendo muy triste, muy angustiante, porque al escuchar las balaceras la única opción que siempre tenías era agarrar a tus hijos y correr al monte, refugiarte en el monte, porque era lo único que tenías. Cuando había muertos, las mismas personas del pueblo, pues los arrastraban a escondernos. ¿Por qué? Porque al llegar el gobierno y bajar a los muertos al pueblo, implicaba un costo muy grande, dinero que pues no tenían para subir y tenían que perder a su familiar. Por eso, con el dolor del corazón, tenían que esconder a los muertos hasta que ya el gobierno se iba. Empezaron a quemar casas, a no respetar mujeres ni niños, y por esa situación tan triste, tan lamentable, tuvimos como pensar en la opción de solicitar el asilo. Nos venimos aquí a la frontera de Nogales con la esperanza, con como la sensación de que pudieran darnos el asilo, y llegamos con la sorpresa de que asilo ya no había. Llegamos aquí el día 27 de julio. Tengo 2 hijos y mi cuña tiene 1. Y nos dicen que no. Pues ahora sí que Estados Unidos argumenta la pandemia, el título 42, que es la pandemia. Nosotros ya nos vacunamos, ya nos hicimos la prueba inclusive de COVID ya 2 veces, hemos salido negativos. Llegamos aquí a pagar unas rentas muy caras. Las rentas son demasiado caras. Trabajo casi no te dan porque te piden en la mayoría tu recibo comprobante de domicilio, porque dicen que nosotros nada más a veces vamos de pasada y dejamos el trabajo tirado. En varias de las zonas de aquí ha habido extorsiones. Hemos visto gente que pues porta chalecos, armas, y pues lo único que podemos hacer es cerrar las puertas y las ventanas. De verdad es muy angustiante, muy triste, muy afligido seguir aquí. Como migrante, tomamos la decisión de reunirnos varios, hacer un grupo, hicimos una marcha en protesta del derecho que tenemos de asilo. Como migrantes tenemos ese derecho. Fue en protesta de esa. Lamentablemente, a la primer familia que entró, que fue acompañada por el obispo de Tucson, Edward, le cerraron la puerta rápidamente sin escuchar la necesidad, lo que a ella le pasó, su explicación de por qué ella se viene también para acá. Somos muchas familias que estamos aquí paradas, tenemos esa necesidad, pedimos una protección para nuestros hijos. De verdad los solicitamos, por lo menos que nos escuchen, que vean cada caso y si ustedes quieren valorar cada caso que sea necesario, que puedan abrir nuevamente el derecho al asilo. Se los pedimos, por favor, que se toquen el corazón y que realmente cuando estás de este lado, cuando tú sabes o vives, es muy triste, es muy, muy angustiante y siempre vives como con la incertidumbre de que qué va a pasar el día de mañana, qué es lo que va a pasar con nuestros hijos, con su educación. Pedimos, por favor, que puedan regresarnos el derecho al asilo.
Well, so that is, of course, a very powerful testimony. You can hear me fine, right? Okay. So yes, I mean, the good news that I have to share as an update to this is that Carlota and her family were able to be exempted from Title 42, and they are now in the asylum process inside the United States. But you know, they have to wait for several months, and that's a situation that, you know, people are forced to wait in danger, and there's really no certainty that they are going to be able to request asylum because Title 42 continues to block access to asylum at the border. And many families, you know, faced with this situation, as Carlota was mentioning, it was until they arrived to the border that they learned that there was no access to asylum because of Title 42. And out of desperation, they will consider more dangerous routes as crossing through remote areas, through the desert, jumping through the wall, or in the areas like Texas, you know, going through the river, endangering their lives and sometimes losing their lives in the process because there is no access at the port of entry. So in hoping to be able to, once already inside the United States, you know, an exception is made in their case and they are allowed to begin the asylum process, they try these more dangerous routes, more dangerous crossing points. And that's the situation right now at the border because of Title 42. So I want to switch now to inside the United States. As you know, our immigration system is very close, is very tight, and there's a lot of difficulties for people even already living inside the United States, already working here for years, you know, being part of the community, being part of the society. It's very complicated for them to access a lawful status, and there, you know, there's supposed to be pathways through family, through work, and through humanitarian reasons, but these are very difficult. And you probably have heard about the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or, you know, so-called DACA, or Dreamers, DACA recipients. And it is very important to understand what is it in the first place, because DACA is not actually a status, is not a pathway to citizenship, is not it's nothing but a protection against removal. It's something that prevents the migration authorities from expelling you from the United States. And DACA has been around for 10 years now. It was during Obama's administration that it was announced as a consideration for people that arrive as children to the United States, and that they have been living, studying, working inside the United States, that they have no criminal background, no criminal history, and so that they are eligible for a work permit, employment authorization document, and this prevention against removal. So as it says, it's a prosecutorial discretion, to defer this deportation. It doesn't make it impossible, but it's a certain protection to prevent deportation from happening right away. And again, it's not a legal status, and as you know, it's still currently in danger because there's been a lot of efforts as this court in southern Texas that held that DACA policy is illegal. So the federal government, yes, they appealed the decision. So people who already had DACA can still file for renewal, but USCIS is not granted any applications for the first time. And a lot of people, I know of several young people that finish high school and they were hoping, once, because they have to be 15 years old or older in order to apply for DACA. So a lot of them were waiting for the opportunity to request, DACA and be able to have this protection against removal and this work authorization. But right now, a lot of people are not able to apply because first-time applications are blocked. And that's the situation. And, there's been efforts to make it a little bit more of a pathway, not like this band-aid against, not having a status, but an actual opportunity for these people who arrive in their childhood, who have growth inside the United States, that all they know is the United States, its culture, and its people, and they feel Americans because they are Americans. But the reality is that there's no option for them, and there's no option for a lot of them because only certain people are able to renew it. But there are a lot that are waiting to approach to this benefit. So that's DACA, and the other one is the temporary protected status. So
Pedro,
this, yes.
We can see your notes and everything.
Uh-huh.
Did you want to, can you reshare so we just see the slide?
Sure. Yeah, let me do it again.
Sorry.
No worries. How about now? Good. Okay. So yeah, the temporary protected status, this is when Homeland Security designates that a country, due to certain specific conditions, should be granted this temporarily relief to nationals that are already in the United States, to prevent them from having to return to a dangerous situation, such as a civil war, a natural disaster. I don't know if some of you have watched like this movie, The Terminal, with Tom Hanks, that he arrives to the United States and all of a sudden there's a war in his country, and basically he's forced to wait in the airport. Well, in reality, this would be something that could benefit any situation. So USCIS may grant this TPS to certain countries or parts of countries that are all, but they have to be people already inside the United States. So it's not an invitation for people of that country to arrive in the United States. And again, the same as DACA, it's not a status and it's not a pathway to citizenship. It's just a protection against removal. And also, it entitles an employment authorization document, like a permit to work. The countries that are currently designated that nationals that are inside the United States can benefit from this temporary protected status are Afghanistan, Myanmar, Cameroon, El Salvador, Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, Syria, Ukraine, Venezuela, and Yemen. So only those countries are only people that are already here, and it's not a pathway for citizenship. Is not a temporary status or a non-immigrant status. It's just a protection against removal, and it allows you to have certain, to have a work authorization, so you can apply for a job opportunity. And well, basically with this information, and it's very important, you probably already see on Advocacy 101 how to do like this lobbying, this congressional visit. So remember to be specific with your ask. So what can you do? Well, you can ask the staffer or the congressional representative to publicly oppose and denounce the continuation and expansion. As I was mentioning, the Biden administration is currently trying to expand the use of Title 42 to other nationalities, trying to negotiate with Mexico the reception of additional nationalities in Mexico. To oppose any legislation, or right now it's part of the decision of the budget for 2023. So any reconciliation package intended to keep Title 42 in place, and to support policies that restore access to asylum and due process for migrants, because right now that's the problem, that there is not an asylum process at the border. And also to support legislation that creates a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, especially DACA recipients, TPS holders, farm workers, and other essential workers. That there's an option for these migrants that are a part of our society to be able to get not a band-aid, but an actually solution to their lack of status. And well, finally, here's my contact information. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pedro. Yeah, now if there's anybody with any questions, we would love to hear them, and Pedro and myself can hopefully answer questions about specific policy. If any more specific questions or any questions at all regarding what we just talked about. Okay, we have a question in the comments. If TPS is only for people already in the US, then how does it help people who still need to get out, if at all?
Well, it doesn't. So it is just a protection for people who are already inside the United States, that they could benefit from this, and they have to be only of these designated countries. So not every country is on the list. So yeah, it is not a solution, for example, for asylum seekers that are waiting at the border for an opportunity to be admitted and begin the asylum process. It's not something that will benefit from them.
You can also take, if you don't have migration policy specific questions, if there are any lingering questions about Advocacy Day in general, we'd be happy to field those while we're here as well.
Oh, okay. It looks like we have a question.
Okay, so you said earlier that they have reasonings that don't pertain to COVID-19 for keeping Title 42 in place. What are their reasonings?
Great question, thank you. Yeah, so again, ever since Title 42 came out, advocates, migrants, everybody that is working, not only in the border region, but across the United States with migrant populations, we were denouncing that the pandemic was just an excuse. If you see at the prior behavior of the Department of Homeland Security, they were already trying to limit or block access to asylum. And so they tried with metering, but there were lawsuits against its use and how it was illegal, for forcing people to wait in a foraging country and having like this list as if you were like taking a number at the supermarket to buy some meat or whatever. We're talking about a life or death situation there. And then you have the remaining Mexico, and then you have they find the perfect excuse with the pandemic. So a lot of the arguments behind it was like, some were like technicalities, like, you know, the CDC didn't follow like a proper procedure in order to terminate, but it's basically like they recognize that CDC can issue an order, you know, unilaterally blocking access to asylum for health reasons, but they cannot do the same to terminate their own order. They have to go through all this process of consulting, taking public comments, and only after that being able to rescind their own order. And but a lot of the arguments you probably have heard in the media that there are hundreds of thousands of migrants at the border, and this will only generate like an open invitation for migrants to overcrowd our immigration system. And that is not the reality that we are seeing in the border. I can tell you, we serve everyday meals to around 300, 350 migrants, but they are 300. We're not talking about hundreds of thousands of people waiting at the border. That's not the reality. And it's not a number that will break down the system. You just need to prepare in advance. And it's the same, for example, if you recall, during the pandemic, they also blocked for just certain period of time, it was around a year, less than a year and a half, that they blocked non-essential travel. Like if there were people with a tourist visa, if they were only US citizen and legal permanent residents were able to come and go as they please from and to the United States. But if you were a person again with a visa, you weren't allowed inside the United States because of the pandemic. And they terminate this restriction as November of 2021. And yes, I remember that it was November 8th. There was a very long line of vehicles trying to cross to the United States, because what happened? Well, for a year and a half, more or less, they weren't able to cross to come to the United States because there was this restriction for non-essential travelers. So yes, what did CBP did? Well, they prepare in advance in order to process all the people that will be coming to visit the United States. And they did it for tourism and commerce, but they are not willing to do it for people seeking to save their lives, seeking protection, seeking assistance. And again, if you go right now to the border, there's not these long lines of vehicles waiting, because you maintain the access, the door open, so people are able to come and go. And so yes, maybe as soon as you resume access to the asylum, you may have all these people that have been waiting for over 2 years and a half to be able to request asylum approaching to the border, but not hundreds of thousands. And definitely, once you are able to process and maintain the access open, this will normalize. But that's a lot of these questions and this reasoning behind it had nothing to do with mitigating COVID-19.
It looks like we have another question in the comments. Can you still apply for asylum and withholding of removal if you are within the United States already?
I mean, the thing is, if you just enter the United States, you're going to be immediately expelled under Title 42. And that's, the discretion. So immigration law gives a lot of discretion to the immigration authorities. And that's the thing. And yes, you can still apply for asylum. Let's say that you enter another way. You enter with a tourist visa, and then all of a sudden the situation changes. Yes, you can apply within a year after your entrance or after the situation happened. You can still apply for asylum and begin the asylum process. But if you're trying to request admission to begin the asylum process, or you cross through our non-designated port of entry and you try to apply for asylum, then you can be expelled under Title 42. And withholding of removal, for those of you who are not familiar with, it's kind of like asylum, but it's for people that do not qualify for asylum for whatever reason. And the standard is higher than asylum. So with asylum, you go through a credible fear interview, With withholding of removal, it's a reasonable peer interview. So the standard is higher. You have to prove that, that violence, that persecution that you're suffering is, more likely than not to happen to you if you were to return to your country. So yes, that still happens, but if you're just entering or if you're seeking admission, then Title 42 is blocking you from accessing asylum and withholding of removal and Convention Against Torture.
Okay, well, muchísimas gracias, Pedro. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you to everyone that participated in this webinar. If you have any other questions, you can email myself. You can also email Pedro. We're happy to answer any other questions about immigration policy that might come up. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Jorge, for the invitation. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And you can always look for more resources. ISN has great resources on their webpage. And also you can go to our website, kinoborderinitiative.org. There's a lot of information. You can check out the different resources that we have. And yes, it's very important. The best that you can do regarding these issues is to keep informed. So, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So just learn as much as you can. And yes, we'll be happy to assist you. We don't have all the answers. And that is something that I want you to keep in mind. You don't need to be an immigration expert in order to do advocacy. You just need to care.
I think very well said. Yeah, there is. I mean, it's great to be able to talk about specific policy information, but arguably the most important thing, especially for these meetings that we're planning around Advocacy Day for the Teach-in, the most important thing is to having this or talking points, right, or backgrounders, or that's a great starting point. But being able to talk about the experiences of people. Like if we have stories, if we have witnessed things at the border, right? If we've visited Kino before, and even just experiences of folks that we've learned from, that we've talked to, these things are incredibly valuable, especially for our Congress people, to be able to relate our specific experiences and the experiences of people who vote in these districts, who live and reside in these districts, of our representatives. They want to hear what we think and how we think and what our reasoning is. Having perfect understanding of policy is not necessary. Having a good grasp on the situation is incredibly helpful, but there's no need to know every detail of policy. So yeah, thank you all for participating. This has been recorded and will be sent out. Yeah, thank you.